some news on Florida's offensive line this week that nobody was expecting. We're going to get you caught up with everything you need to know about the Gators offensive line with former All-American offensive lineman Shannon Snell. All right, Shannon, UF brings back a good core of offensive linemen in Barber and Iguakin and Leonard. What do you think about that core group of guys that UF will have anchoring the offensive line this year?
You talking about Kingsley and you talking about Austin. Those are two guys that are probably going to be all SEC guys. They had a really good year last year. You could have counted them in that conversation to begin with, but they're the leaders this year. Plus, there's a bunch of big guys on the line. You take a look at them; they're 6'6" and better. Guys 320, 330 pounds. So I'm super excited because you're going to really get to see what Billy Napier likes to do. He likes big guys. He takes that Alabama recipe.
Yep.
Wants to run the football to set up play action pass. So I'm excited. These guys, they've been working hard in the offseason. I've seen them more times than I like to admit, but they've been working really hard and they've been grinding. So it's going to be an important camp for not only Billy Napier but for these offensive linemen.
Let's talk a little bit about Micah Mazuka. There was obviously a little bit of drama in the offseason, but it seems like things have really smoothed over. Have you heard how he is recovering, and do you think he's going to be ready for Utah?
Yeah, that a shoulder injury is always tough, just for an offensive lineman when you have, you're using your shoulders, your hands, your arms, 99% of the time as an offensive lineman. So he's doing well. There was just during the spring there was just some miscommunication. He's doing better. He's adjusting well. Do I think he'll be ready? It really just determines when the reps go live, when he starts to get those one-on-one reps against defensive linemen. So if it holds up, I think he'll be ready and he'll be good enough to start.
We heard some really unfortunate news last week about Goodwin's mom. She's really sick. He's going to move home to help take care of her. Is he a starting piece that the Gators are, this is going to be a really big loss?
Yeah, he was big bodied, played well in spring. The good news is, and this is the thing about not only SEC, but we're talking ACC, we're talking about all around the country, is that you have to have a good backup. You have to have some guys that are ready to step up. If this was the question last year, I think UF would have been in a lot of trouble because they only had 6 or 7 guys
Right.
that legitimately could step on the football field and on the offensive line and play some great SEC football. This year, I think Billy Napier and his staff and Rob Sale have done a really good job recruiting. They've been able to find guys that not only could step in and fill shoes, but they actually have starting qualities. So I think that's more important this year than ever because last year you see a lot of these guys getting wore down, and when the injury bug started to hit, I mean, Florida's offensive line, that offense took a big hit. So, losing him is an awful situation. Obviously, what's going on with his mom, so you prayers out to him. But he's got to step in and do what's best for his family, and Florida's just got to have the next man step up.
You talked about how good Florida has been recruiting offensive line. 2 guys who are coming in from the transfer portal are Damian George and Lindell Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
George is from Bama. Hudson's from FIU. It seems like they're going to probably play maybe an even more important role than we realized when we signed them. How paramount are they going to be this season?
Super important. We're talking about Florida finally getting to a point that they have a 2-man depth chart on the offensive line. And if you don't recruit the offensive line for a solid year, 2 years, and you fall behind the 8 ball, and then you're depending on freshmen, which the offensive line is not the spot that you want an incoming freshman to play right away. They need some development, especially when playing against some of these SEC caliber defensive lines. So I think hitting the portal, finding a guy from Alabama, getting guys that have been kind of battle tested is really good. And I think that's so important. And we talk about, one thing that I don't want to ever give Florida State any credit is that they hit the portal hard. The
Yeah.
portal is a really good place to find talent, to find guys that just weren't a good fit for the system. And I think Billy Napier really did that. And I think I think it's really important for him, especially with, one of the toughest schedules in the entire country coming up.
So you mentioned that you don't love to see freshmen starting on your offensive line.
No.
We've got Harris and Kearney, and they're young guys that are on campus. Like you said, it's not ideal to put freshmen on the offensive line, but they could be relied on pretty heavily this year. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, you talk Roger Kearney. He came from a school in IMG that these guys are battle tested. They play against the best of the best. And if you take a look at him, he had a really, really good spring. I know Rob Sale was really happy with him. Sometimes, it takes a guy a while to get that mentality to play, especially against tougher competition. I think he was really impressed with him. He stepped in and took some first team reps, which was really cool to see. You don't see that out of freshmen. A lot of times freshmen come in and they, as an offensive lineman, you got to learn the system, you got to learn the plays, you got to do a lot of different stuff. But Rod did a really good job coming in, getting his body ready. IMG, they taught him really well how to prepare, and you can see that it's paying off. I mean, he's in the two depth rotation chart, and don't be surprised if you see him as the opening day starter or being able to pull some really valuable reps.
We have talked about this before, but two offensive line coaches, how much is that going to help in the development, not only of the young guys, but the new guys that we get in from the portal as well?
So a lot of people kind of doubt it and they say, well, why do you have two offensive line coaches? A lot of people don't realize that when I was playing, I had two offensive line coaches too. I had Jimmy Ray Stevens and John Hoke. And it's good to have that because a lot of times there's 5 positions on the field that any one
Mhm.
coach has a coach. And that's the most out of any position, right? Wide receiver, you may have 3 or 4 wide sets out there, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, whatever you want to do. There's 5 offensive linemen, so a lot of times the offensive line coach, if you have one guy may lose some of that valuable information or valuable coaching time that you can substitute with 2 in that, and especially with Rob Sale. Rob Sale is an offensive line guru. He did wonders with the New York Giants a couple of years ago. That line was the New York Giants a couple of years ago. They were terrible, but the offensive line was actually one of the bright spots of that team, and that was a lot due to him. So, you know, we have this time and uh, we have this time that we can say, hey, should we revisit the fact that should we have 2 offensive line coaches? I think it's great for a lot of aspects, especially recruiting. You have
Yeah.
2 guys that said, hey, we're going to give you the proper coaching. We're going to give you the proper development, and I think that's a great thing for Florida what they're doing on that aspect.
So you mentioned recruiting. Florida got a big offensive lineman in Fletcher Westfall recently, and obviously they can sell potential playing time to him. Is that a position group you want to see them go after, maybe even a little bit harder on the trail?
That's a catch-22, Allie. I think they've done a really good job, and you could say on the trail you want a guy for 4 years, 4 or 5 years, but with the advancement of the portal, I think you can go in there and really supplement what you don't get.
Yeah.
We know what college football has become when you're getting kids out of high school. It's sometimes become a little bit of a bidding war, and you don't want to overpay for somebody that you just don't know. An offensive line is a prime spot that you just don't know what it's going to turn out to be, especially at the end of that development. If you can get a guy that can come in right away, that's been proven, that's played some games, whether it doesn't matter the conference, then you can supplement that. You can supplement that on the field. Do you want to make that a part of your recruiting strategy? Absolutely not. You want to recruit kids and that buy into your program. But
Sure.
I think with the portal, I think Florida's done a good job. I think they've been able to get big guys. They've been able to get guys, and think about Osiris Torres a couple years ago. He was one of the best linemen in the entire country. So they hit the portal. They found their guy. So I think Billy Napier is a good guy that recognizes talent. So I think it's maybe a little bit overblown that Florida needs to go a little bit tougher in the portal, especially for offensive linemen. I think they're fine, or in the recruiting trail, I think they're fine. They've been doing a good job getting who they want.
We spoke in the spring and you talked about depth and you talked about how you honestly thought this upcoming season, the offensive line may be more deep than it was the previous year. And then you alluded to that a little bit in this interview as well. So you're feeling good overall. You like where Florida sits depth wise with the offensive line?
Yeah, I think Austin Barber's going to be an all-star. I think he is, the lineage of what Florida's seen at offensive line. He's really done a good job in the weight room. He's done a great job with his leadership. And I remember I pulled him aside in the spring, and, Austin's his own worst critic. Like, he takes everything, he wants to make every block, which is, as a sophomore, as a guy that's really young, that's really encouraging to see.
Mhm.
But then you have a nice mix of guys that have been in the portal, that have been at other schools, and you don't really have. Is it a weakness? Absolutely not. Is there inexperience? Yeah, absolutely. But you see that all across the country.
Mhm.
So I think that when these guys go out to Utah, the very first game of the season, the opening game of the season, you'll see exactly what Florida has on the offensive line. But I'm pretty confident that they're going to do a pretty good job this season.
All right, so we've gone through most of the guys, but what one offensive lineman are you most confident in and do you think has the best chance to really shock people? Is that Austin Barber or is that
It
somebody else?
is. It is Austin. Yeah, he's. If you take a look at the end of the season last year, he was thrusted into the starting lineup. Did a fantastic job. He's playing left tackle this season, and that's even more important for Graham Mertz because
Mhm.
you don't want that blindside pressure that Mertz is going to have. He's not Anthony Richardson. He's not going to get you out of a lot of jams with his legs. So Austin is counting on even more. So at the end of the day, it's going to be him. But I think he's done a fantastic job. He's gotten that game experience from last year. And now this year, I think it's really his time to show out. It's his time to really shine. And if he has a great season this year, you're looking at the following year that he's a top name in the NFL draft.
Ooh, those are words that Gator fans like to hear.
Oh yeah,
I appreciate Shannon Snell for joining me tonight. We have another video coming with him later in the week on UF's huge recruiting event, The Grill in the Ville. So lock in with the channel so you don't miss it. If you want to get caught up on the guys the O-line will be blocking for, we broke down UF's running backs right here.